During his time traveling, Xiyu became the younger brother of a talented actor and followed his elder brother to seek refuge with Cao Cao. However, he had extraordinary military strength since childhood, but he did not like to fight or kill, and only wanted to be a quiet and beautiful man. Therefore, he overcame public opinion and became a civil servant, becoming an inconspicuous member of Cao Cao's military division. The Battle of Puyang. Lord Liu Bu is unbeatable, we can't beat him. Cao Cao. Quickly. Go to the military camp and hire a military advisor. The Battle of Guandu. My lord. Yuan Jun, Yan Liang, has a great literary and ugly power. What should we do? Cao Cao. Go and invite the military master. Let the military master kill Yan Liang and Wen Chou for me. The two armies engaged in battle and declared themselves invincible. Xiyu took off her top. Cao Cao. Strike. The military commander is warming up. Xiyu. Don't call me anymore. I'm really not a fierce general. Keywords of the novel. A good strategist with weak character, you fight 3 heroes alone. No pop-ups, the agreed weak strategist, you fight 3 heroes alone. Download the complete set of TXT. As a civil and weak strategist, are you fighting 3 heroes alone? Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Go to Cao Camp to find a livelihood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Go to Cao Camp to find a livelihood in late autumn of 192. Yenzhou Military Camp, Chenlu. The Yellow Turban bandits rose from Qingshu and slaughtered the people in Yenzhou, killing Ren Qingxiang and Governor Lu Dai. So the famous scholars within the territory, as well as many feudal generals, elected Cao Cao as the governor of Yenzhou, ordering him to take orders in the face of danger, pacify his bandits, and stabilize people's hearts. Under the heavy responsibility, Cao Cao issued numerous orders to seek help from ambitious individuals within his territory. Under his command, the advisor Sun Yu wrote another letter inviting Yingchuan's talented individuals to show their loyalty and ambition. Cao Cao and Sun Yu set out 20 miles to welcome talented actors into the camp, discussing major events in the world together. At this time, the situation was chaotic, Yenzhou was slaughtered, and the people were struggling. Shidu is newly built, everything is 100 pieces waiting to be revived. At this moment, outside the camp of Shidu military camp, Sun Yu is waiting. After a moment, the two of them had a great conversation and walked out of the tent together, chatting and laughing. Sun Yu immediately bowed, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. It seems that the Lord should be quite pleased. Although Zhicai is a wild and unrestrained person, this time the protagonist is courteous, and amidst his busy schedule, he has traveled 10 miles to welcome him, which is naturally admirable. Ha ha ha. Cao Cao laughed and reached out to pat the back of the talented actor's hand. Sir, the strategy is very similar to mine. Thank you very much, sir. Taking Yenzhou as a foothold and setting up a base along the river, one can compete in the northern region. Only in this way can the Lord obtain the position of the Lord. Zizikai's expression was calm, and he continued speaking loudly, completely fearless of the gaze of others. This person's temperament was already understood by Cao Cao during the negotiation, and it should have always been like this, so he realized that their temperament matched. Everyone has something to say, don't be afraid of what others say, just speak impartially. My lord. Sun Yu smiled lightly and bowed. At this moment, there was no need for him to speak. Cao Cao also understood that he was asking for his opinion. He quickly stepped forward and grabbed Sun Yu's hand, saying, "Thank you very much, Wenruo. If it weren't for Wenruo's recommendation, when would I have obtained such a talented person? Zhicai truly shares my temperament, and in the future, he will be able to accompany me frequently and discuss major matters." That's good, don't disappoint the Lord's trust. Sun Yu's face remained calm and he arched his hand down. He doesn't ask for gratitude, but only for the ability to formulate a strategy, so that in the future, he can strengthen his army in support Han to achieve success and fame. Where is Jizai and Fengyi? He bid farewell to his friend and came from the south of Yenzhou. He should also arrive today, said the name. Shi Jizai couldn't help but laugh and cry. After responding to Sun Yu, he immediately explained to Cao Cao, Fengyi is my younger brother. Ming Shi Yu, with the courtesy name, Fengyi. I am now in my 20s and 40s. In my early years, I traveled abroad to study and met many underprivileged children. Now, I have friends who have traveled far and gone to see each other off. I was supposed to come with me to meet the Lord, but it delayed the journey. The talent for serving righteousness is not under me, so I can be a scholar. Cao Cao was suddenly surprised. When he heard it, he didn't take it seriously. He only felt that his elder brother, Shi Zhong, had a strategic plan in his mind and was supposed to be entrusted with an important task, bringing a younger brother under his command. It's just an additional position. He can even become a talented actor and a disciple. I didn't expect such a high evaluation. Seriously? Cao Cao asked with great anticipation. Brother, how could he become weak? In the future, wouldn't there be two wise talents who can formulate strategies? Sun Yu smiled but remained silent. Only then did he realize that he was exaggerating his acting skills. He immediately smiled bitterly and said, however, although he is intelligent and talented, he is not good at classic books and theories. He is not familiar with Confucian theories, and as for military strategy and tactics, I have not seen them, but I have some thoughts on making judgments. He, on the other hand, aspires to become a civil servant. Cao Cao squinted his eyes and immediately understood that he had probably shown his talent since childhood, but he had not been able to learn what he had learned. Many humble scholars were buried as a result. Due to the fact that books and knowledge are mostly controlled by the aristocrats, it is regrettable. But it's never too late to come and learn. If you want to become a civil servant, cultivating good students is not difficult. During the conversation, a commotion suddenly came from outside the camp. Cao Cao and others looked for the sound and saw dust and smoke rising in the distance, and the galloping figures of war horses gathered. More than 10 horses rushed towards the military camp. The soldiers stationed outside the military camp were naturally unaware of these people and immediately sent troops to surround them from both sides. Cao Cao saw a group of cavalry from the vanguard camp coming out of the camp and heading straight outside the main camp, and his heart immediately became suspicious. Who broke into my military camp? The talented actor said coldly, maybe. It's serving righteousness. Go and take a look. Cao Cao immediately set off, with a talented actor behind him. He had just chosen him as the sacrificial wine, so we should not embarrass him. If his brother is injured, how can we trust each other in the future? Cao Cao walked out of the main tent and told the guards, you should immediately gallop forward and shout and stop him. Do not harm him. Here, the guard flipped over and mounted his horse, galloping forward at lightning speed. But ultimately, it was from the internal camp and the speed was not fast. The cavalry rushing forward were covered in bloodstains, with heads wrapped around their horses. After the horses, they even dragged many people on the ground. At first glance, the people in the natural forward camp were a bit strange, and Cao Chun was the first to get on his horse and stop. Who broke into the camp? Get off your horse immediately. Get off your horse immediately, drop your weapon. Do not trespass. Otherwise, you will shoot arrows. At this moment, with a slight beard around his mouth, the slender and beautiful general drew his sword and ran away. To establish military power through this. Charge forward a few steps, gradually revealing a clear figure in the dust, quite young and full of energy. Long hair belongs to the back of the head and forms a simple ponytail, with long hair fluttering on both temples. Also holding a long knife. At first glance, Cao Chun felt a slight displeasure in his heart. He was also a young and inexperienced student, truly unaware of the vastness of heaven and earth. These days are not without encountering those who have come to camp. These young villagers all want to take advantage of this opportunity to showcase their martial arts skills, in order to gain some reputation by joining the camp. In the tumultuous autumn, anyone can be encountered. It's just a little clever, today's one is particularly impolite. Kid, I was going to get you off the horse. Cao Chun's gaze stiffened, his cheeks bulged, and he raised his hand to strike at the young man's sword, using his wrestling power to push him off the warhorse and establish his authority before proceeding. Sure enough, the person in charge directly put the knife in front, and the two blades collided. One of them was suddenly cut out and then embedded in each other, reaching a state of wrestling. Cao Chun was about to exert force when suddenly he felt like a raging mountain wave pressing down, and he flew down from his horse with a loud bang, hitting the ground. This hit was too hard, causing a scorching pain in the back. I came from a military background and fell off my horse to avoid serious injuries. At this moment, the young man dismounted and placed the chipped knife in front of Cao Chun, with a hint of anger in his eyes. Just as I was about to speak, I heard a distant reprimand, "Fengyi. Put down your knife." At this moment, Cao Cao was approaching the gate, his footsteps paused, and he stared at the tall figure holding a knife. My heart beats a little faster. Is this really determined to become a civil servant? Shouldn't this person be a fierce general? I think his bravery is probably not inferior to that of Lu Bu back then. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. If it's really not possible, you can also become a leader. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. If it's really not possible, you can also become a leader, brother. The young man was none other than Shi Yu. Upon hearing the reprimand, he put away his sword and bowed to Shi Zhong, who was walking briskly. Why break into a military camp? Shi Yu took a deep breath and calmed his mood, saying, along the way, he met the Yellow Turban bandit who was killed. He fled all the way but never recovered. Running away. Shi Zhong glanced at the head hanging from the horse's back, as well as the captive of the Yellow Turban thief dragged by a rope. This scene may not have any connection to running away at all. Cao Cao on the side listened with joy. Jitsai, your younger brother is exceptionally brave and powerful. Why don't you follow me around and start as a general? As soon as the people around them heard this, they immediately envied him. Those who had not achieved any success immediately became generals upon entering the camp. You should know that in this chaotic world, the least valuable thing is human life. After a great war, tens of thousands of people die. But if one becomes a general, it will be difficult to die unless there is a battle in front of them, and they can even make military achievements. Before Shi Ji could speak, Shi Yu, who was standing on the side, shook her head directly. No, I'm following my older brother in the family just to come to Cao camp and plan for a civil servant, even if it's a hot-headed army. I don't want to be a general. After speaking, Shi Yu directly threw down the knife in his hand and stood behind his brother. This series of operations directly startled Cao Cao and the people around him. Are you not interested in a biased general? Cao Ren, standing not far from Cao Cao, saw this. Biting his teeth, he spoke again and said, this brave warrior, but he thinks he's too young. Why don't you come to our military camp? I beg the Lord to give you a miscellaneous general. How about leading 5,000 soldiers directly? Shi Yu didn't expect that he had already clearly refused, so there were still people holding on to him. So he could only continue to patiently explain, I am a civil servant. I have been familiar with the art of war since I was young, and my grandson is very skilled in it. Moreover, the Lord has taken over the Yenzhou pastoral area, occupying the time, land, and people. Why not let me follow my brother and contribute to the Lord under the command of General Sun? Sun Yu, who was originally standing on the side watching the play, didn't expect to end up dragging himself in as well. And what he didn't expect was that Xiyu refused so decisively. Seeing Cao Cao looking at him, Sun Yu felt that he should say something. Since that's the case, Fengyi, let me explain. The Lord has taken over the Yanzhou pastoral area and occupied the harmony of heaven, earth, and people. What is the harmony of heaven, earth, and people? Upon hearing this, Xiyu immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that as long as he passed this hurdle, he should not be far from being a civil servant. After a moment of serious contemplation, he spoke up and said, Duke Cao leads this Yanzhou herdsman, eager for talent, issuing a talent-seeking order, and employing people without doubt. This is human harmony. Nowadays, Yanzhou is in turmoil and often harassed by moths and thieves. Cao Gong's cavalry is resting and recuperating. After pacifying Yanzhou, they can focus on cultivating water warfare talents. When there is chaos going south, the Lord can mobilize his army, which is advantageous. As for the timing, please forgive me for not being able to answer at the moment. Sun Yu was taken aback by the words and exchanged a glance with Cao Cao. He quickly spoke up, this is not acceptable. Fengyi, since you have said that the land is favorable and the people are harmonious, why don't you also talk about the timing? Is there any reason not to say that the Lord is here? What Xiyu didn't know was that Sun Yu had previously discussed with Cao Cao about what he had just said, but he didn't expect a person from the mountains and fields to speak so clearly. Just say it casually, I won't blame you. Cao Cao already had some confidence in Xiyu's talent, especially with his words just now, which had a great impact on him. So I also want to hear what time is. Seeing that Cao Cao and Sun Yu were both holding on tightly, Xiyu had no choice but to look around helplessly before speaking again. Cao Gong, I can only speak to you alone. Look at this. The people around me were all confused when they heard about it. The protagonist self-taught you, why did he really take himself seriously? Okay, it's up to you. After speaking, he turned around and walked towards the military tent, but he felt a little impatient in his heart. However, Xiyu didn't think so much. When Cao Cao agreed, he followed him in. Later, Shi Jizai and Sun Yu exchanged a glance and followed into the military tent. Alright, there's no one here, you keep talking. Xiyu glanced at his elder brother and Sun Yu who followed him in and immediately nodded. He spoke up and said, the heavenly times, in simple terms, are the heavenly sun. The heavenly sun is currently in trouble, and Li Xian and Guosi are in chaos. Cao Gong occupies Yanzhou, but he can secretly contact Xuchang and welcome the heavenly sun into Xuchang. I know that the heavenly sun still has contact with Yuan Shao, but this person is not a concern. As long as the heavenly sun welcomes the heavenly sun back, he can assist the heavenly sun in his name and command the heroes. This is much more effective than the jade seal of the state of transmission. Upon hearing these words, Cao Cao and others were immediately stunned, but in the end, it was only the talented actor who was the first to react. Immediately rebuked, to uphold righteousness, do not talk nonsense. Zizikai is flustered. He didn't expect the courage of Fengyi to be so great. If the Lord blames him but unexpectedly, Cao Cao laughed. Sir, I, Mr. Cao, have thought about this before. It's just that the Emperor is far away from Cao, and I'm afraid it's beyond our reach. Lord, I think what Fengyi said is quite reasonable. Compared to other feudal lords, Lord has risen to the end of the Wei dynasty. If we can pacify Yanzhou and petition for credit, I believe the Emperor will remember Lord. In this way, Lord will definitely occupy a certain position in the Emperor's heart. Sun Yu was happy in his heart. He didn't expect that he recommended a talented actor to the Lord, and even came with a buy one get one free gift. Cao Cao immediately reacted upon hearing these words. Sir, you are indeed a great talent. As he spoke, he took a few steps forward, grabbed Xiyu's hands, vigorously slapped him a few times, and smiled as he spoke. Sir, you are brave and talented, and you have the ability to govern the world. Why not come to my account and be my guard? No, no, I have always aspired to become a civil servant since I was young, and I have been familiar with Sun Tzu's art of war since childhood. Why don't you let me become a compiler or a frontrunner? Upon hearing this, Cao Cao frowned and said, Fengyi, please tell me that you want to become a civil servant, but you feel that the position of a military general is too small. If that's the case, you don't need to stay as a guard. I will appoint you as the Grand General, who can lead 1,000 armies and horses. How about that? Upon hearing these words, Shi Yu's heart was filled with death. Lord, I really don't want to become a military general. I am just a civil servant, and I have no strength to bind a chicken. Watching Shi Yu's reluctant expression on his face, Cao Cao sighed, knowing that he couldn't force others to be difficult, so he could only retreat and seek second place. That being the case, you can stay by my side and I'll give you a spot in the book, but you can express your opinions at any time. Do you think so? Upon hearing these words, Shi Yu immediately attached himself and bowed, Thank you, Lord. And the talented actor on the side also bowed down and said, Thank you, Lord. It's night, Chao's army camp. Cao Cao held a grand banquet because he had 2 new advisors. End of this chapter. Compared to military force, my knowledge is even more powerful in Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Compared to military force, my knowledge is even more powerful in Chapter 3. Cao Cao was appointed as the chief, and it was customary for Sun Yu to be the first on his left hand, but today's banquet was originally held for the 2 brothers of the opera family. So he took the initiative to let Shi Jizai and Shi Yu sit on Cao Cao's left side. On the right side are generals such as Cao Ren. Watching the table full of chickens, ducks, fish, and meat, Shi Yu was extremely excited. Finally, I saw the meat smell. Over the years, I have lived in the deep mountains and forests with my elder brother, lacking food and clothing, and even more so, there have been constant wars. The 2 brothers can basically be said to be hungry and full. Not to mention eating meat. Cao Cao didn't say much when he saw the situation, and immediately ordered everyone to eat. Thank you very much, Lord. With a response, Shi Yu no longer cared about others and immediately transformed into a cook. Slow down, don't lose your grace in front of the Lord. After all, he had just arrived, and his acting talent was somewhat reserved. Watching his own brother's performance, he felt a bit awkward. Cao Cao smiled and waved his hand, Oh, there's no need to be cautious when it comes to ambition. As the saying goes, those who are capable should work hard. This act of serving righteousness is the true temperament. Seeing this, it was difficult to say anything more and he also started to eat along. However, compared to Shi Yu, he was much more refined. A meal was finished and it was already late at night. It was just that Shi Yu was so good at eating, and in the end, Cao Cao felt a little nervous. I thought to myself that if Shi Yu suddenly stopped like this, I might not be able to afford it anymore. So early the next morning, Cao Cao sent someone to deliver a letter to Chenlu. Chenlu County. Wei Mansion. Wei Eyes looked at the letter in his hand with an incredulous expression on his face. Why does the Lord send someone to inform us of such a small matter? Upon hearing this, Cao Chun looked embarrassed. He really doesn't know how to speak. Lord Wei, the Lord just asked me to personally deliver this letter to you and then tell you that these 2 brothers from the drama family are both skilled in both literature and martial arts. As for the rest, I didn't say much. Is it both civil and military? Cao Chun nodded and said, however, Shi Yu insisted on becoming a civil servant and refused to become a military general. No matter how big an official the Lord promised, he didn't want it. In the end, he even said he was willing to become the leader of the fire. I'm afraid he might not have enough to eat. Upon hearing this, Wei Eyes was momentarily taken aback and then burst into laughter. I understand the Lord's meaning now. Please wait a moment, I'll pack up and go see the Lord with you. As a businessman, Wei Eyes naturally possesses the mind of a businessman. In times of chaos, even with abundant wealth, one still cannot find peace and can only seek investment from wise masters as the best strategy. And he fell in love with Cao Cao a long time ago. I think this person has great potential. He began to continuously support Cao Cao. And when it comes to this letter, it must be because Cao Cao was short of money and food, and he didn't want to speak up, so he made such a mistake. Thinking about this, Wei Eyes ordered people to prepare a large amount of food and money. At present, although Cao Cao is the pastor of Yenzhou, there are rampant moth thieves in his territory. If Cao Cao wants to stabilize this pastor of Yenzhou, the first thing he needs to do is to solve this moth thief. Coincidentally, the playwright brothers came to bid. I believe Cao Cao already had a strategy to defeat the enemy. I should put in some effort myself. The next morning, Weizi carried a large amount of supplies and set off towards Cao camp. Upon learning that Weizi was coming, Cao Cao welcomed him out of the military camp very early. Following closely behind were Sun Yu, and the two brothers of the opera family. How could Duke Wei personally come here? To be honest, Cao Cao did not expect that Wei Eyes would come in person. Every time there is a messenger coming. How can Wei bear the Lord's kindness? I dare not. Weizi had a clear idea of his position. He was just a sponsored businessman. Cao Cao saved his face, but he couldn't take it seriously. Therefore, when dealing with Cao Cao, he dared not neglect him at all, let alone be proud of his favor. Moreover, knowing that he was coming, Cao Cao personally came out to welcome him, which was already enough to give him face. After the two exchanged pleasantries, Weizi turned the topic to Shiyu. May I ask which warrior is both skilled in literature and martial arts? At this moment, Shiyu did not expect that Weizi was talking about herself. Since Cao Cao gave it to a civil servant, Shiyu has been quite satisfied. Just as he was about to fish, he noticed that everyone's gaze was on him. Come, Duke Wei, I would like to introduce you to this Shiyu, who is known for his dedication to righteousness. He truly possesses both literary and military skills, and even my Cao Ren is not a match for him. Oh. Cao Cao did not mention this matter in the letter, so Wei Zi became increasingly curious about Shiyu. Seeing Cao Cao speak, Shiyu also knew that he couldn't fish anymore, so he had to step forward and bow, saying, I have met Lord Wei, and I am not very skilled in both literature and martial arts. Now, I am just a chief clerk by my lord's side. The reason why Shiyu said that is because she also has a helpless expression on her face. I am clearly a civil servant, why do I always get involved with generals? With this in mind, he never gave up and added, compared to military force, my knowledge is even more powerful. I am a civil servant, I am really a civil servant. Weizi didn't expect Shiyu to say that. However, he quickly realized and patted Shiyu's shoulder, saying with a smile, not bad, really good. As for where exactly is good, he didn't say much. Wei Gong, you just need to call him Fengyi. Currently, he is indeed working as a chief clerk by my side. Whenever he talks about this chief clerk, Cao Cao himself finds it unbelievable. Okay. Wei Eyes nodded and then continued, it said you're very good at eating, don't you know if this camp's Chinese food is appetizing? Shiyu didn't know why Wei Zi said this, but he nodded in a conventional manner. The taste is amazing. A few people chatted at the door again, and after the people in Chao's camp had arranged the things brought by Wei Zi, Cao Cao turned around and said to Shiyu, Fengyi, are you hungry? If you're hungry, I'll take you to eat. Shiyu looked embarrassed upon hearing this. Master, please don't do this. I've only been eating for a while now. If you keep asking like this, people will think I'm a glutton. Upon hearing this, Cao Cao was momentarily taken aback, and then burst into laughter. As for Sun Yu and others, they were even more uncomfortable, wanting to laugh but not daring to. Wei Zi came to find Cao Cao. Apart from transporting provisions and taking a glance at the two brothers of the opera family, he naturally had important matters to discuss with Cao Cao. After having dinner at night, Sun Yu and others collectively arrived at Cao Cao's camp. Although the two brothers from the opera family had just arrived, as advisors to Cao Cao, they were also able to attend the meeting. Looking at the people inside the camp, Cao Cao first nodded at Wei Zi and then spoke to everyone, saying, "Since everyone is here, let's talk about it. How should we deal with the moth thieves in Yenzhou now?" End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Do you have a good plan to defeat the moth thief in one fell swoop? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Do you have a good plan to defeat the moth thief in one fell swoop? Inside the tent, as Cao Cao's words fell, his gaze immediately turned to the group of advisors on his left. At this moment, under the leadership of Cao Cao, Sun Yu sat upright at the top of his left hand. This is a meeting for discussion, and Sun Yu could not have given the first place to the playwright brothers like a banquet. Even if he is willing, Cao Cao cannot do so, and the rest of Cao's camp cannot be willing either. As Cao Cao looked at Sun Yu, he did not speak as usual. At present, he and Cao Cao have already made a conclusion. The focus of today's meeting is on the advice of the playwright brothers. After all, those who have just come to work will ultimately have to give others the opportunity to perform. Moreover, the playwright brothers were still good friends of his Sun Yu, so it was impossible for him to steal the other party's attention in such a situation. Looking at Sun Yu without any reaction, Cao Cao understood in his heart that his gaze followed the trend and he still had to follow the right path. Sitting next to him was the strategist Cheng Yu, who was also a strategist who had just joined Cao Cao a few days ago. However, Cheng Yu is also a wise person. Now that he has been appointed as the Shou Zhongling by Cao Cao, even Sun Yu has not spoken at this time, so he naturally cannot speak first at such a time. Cheng Yu remained silent, and Cao Cao's gaze fell directly on the playwright brothers. Shi Yu watched helplessly as Cao Cao's gaze first turned to Sun Yu, followed closely by Cheng Yu, and finally fell on himself and his brother. He didn't pay much attention to the ancient people's particular attention. After all, as the Lord, Cao Cao could not have neglected other advisors because their brothers had just come to participate. If you ask their brothers a question right from the beginning, that's the big question. Watching Cao Cao's gaze turn towards the two brothers, Shi Yu raised her eyebrows lightly. Now that Cao Cao is appointed as the new governor of Yenzhou, and the entire Yenzhou is currently plagued by chaos caused by yellow scarves, it seems to be a big problem. However, Shi Yu, who is familiar with historical development, understands that this cannot be considered a problem. Without the leadership of Zhang Jiao and others, although the power is huge, it is only relative to the overall situation. Most of the yellow scarves in the entire Yenzhou area fled from various parts of Qingzhou, relying on the large number of people to continuously capture several towns, like locusts passing through. However, after all, they are just locusts. The current winning streak is like an illusory bubble, shattering at a touch. This yellow scarf mess cannot withstand this winter at all. After realizing it in his heart, Shi Yu didn't rush to speak up. Although he wanted to be a strategist, it was not a big deal. Moreover, he followed his older brother to join in. Currently, Sun Yu and others have not spoken up, so they are naturally waiting for their talents to show their talents. He naturally understands this kind of thing. Sure enough, seeing that Sun Yu and others had not spoken during this time, Cao Cao couldn't help but speak as he watched the talented actor. "I don't know, Mr. Zhicai, what can you teach me?" Upon hearing Cao Cao's question, Shi Zhicai straightened his robe and solemnly arched his hand towards Cao Cao. "Master, don't worry, it's just a little moth thief. With just one plan, the moth thief can be defeated overnight." As soon as he spoke, everyone inside the camp turned their gaze to the talented actor, who did not intentionally delay and continued to speak. "Lord, with the momentum of consecutive victories, the moth thieves are determined to be complacent and arrogant. Now, all you need is for Lord to deploy more extraordinary troops, wait for work, set up the path for the moth thieves to march, wait for them to pass by, and strike them with the momentum of the peak of the army. You will surely be able to break through the enemy. After the words of the talented actor fell, all the strategists in the big tent nodded. This strategy is not considered a clever one, but it is extremely good for dealing with the current moth thieves. Shiyu also nodded along. My elder brother's strategy ultimately boils down to ambush and surprise attack. Nowadays, there are quite a few yellow scarves in Yenzhou, and even Cao Cao cannot defeat them directly. There are really too few people under my command. At present, the only way to deal with Huang Jin is through this sneak attack. As long as we win a battle, those yellow scarves will inevitably have some restraint, and then we will drag on until winter, and the yellow scarves will be almost gone. Cao Cao, who was above the chief, nodded, and the generals on the right couldn't help but hastily express their opinions. Lord, I am willing to lead my troops. It was Cao Ren who was speaking, and as soon as the skilled Cao Cao nodded, he eagerly stood up and begged for help. As Cao Ren stood up, Xiahou Dun and Xiahou Yuan beside him couldn't sit still. Lord, even the last general is willing to lead troops. For the leading general, fighting is basically a matter of grabbing. Cao Cao, who was newly appointed as the governor of Yenzhou, did not actually have many soldiers under his command. On the other hand, the generals under my command are all brothers within the clan, and they are all good leaders of troops. However, although the general has it, there are only so many soldiers under his command. If we really have to confront Huang Jin at the moment, if you lead the troops, I won't have a chance. Although they are all brothers from our own families, we don't want to let this kind of thing of making contributions by wearing yellow scarves. As several generals repeatedly requested orders, Cao Cao couldn't help but smile directly. Zixiao, Yuanrang, Miaocai, please sit down first. There is still no consensus on the agenda in the account, why are you in a hurry? Cao Cao smiled and glared at the few people, and Cao Ren and others quickly sat back in frustration. At this moment, Cao Cao's gaze turned again towards the talented actor. Although he agrees with the other party's strategy, it is impossible to confront the moth thieves who claim to have nearly 1 million. Ambush is indeed good, but after all, there are still millions of yellow scarves. When he first came to Yenzhou, he didn't run into Huang Jin, it was really impossible to fight. Sir, although this plan is clever, there will eventually be 1 million moth thieves. Although our plan may be victorious, it cannot be determined by a single battle. I have the intention to defeat the moth thieves in one fell swoop. Do you have a good plan, sir? Cao Cao has a big heart, as a talented actor would say, although he can defeat many enemy soldiers in a victory against Huang Jin. However, among the millions of yellow scarves, this victory will eventually make a comeback. There are only so many of them, what should we do when the time comes? This can be considered asking the key point, but the talented actor is speechless in his heart. You really look up to me for giving him such a big challenge right from the beginning. At present, Cao Cao has only a few tens of thousands of soldiers, and even with the addition of the Prime Minister of Jibei, Bao Xian, there won't be much more. Dealing with millions of yellow scarves is still a bit tight at the end. Do you really think that 1 million yellow scarves are so easy to solve? Lu Dai, who thinks so, is already dead. Sun Yu and Cheng Yu sitting next to him also had a slightly bitter expression on their faces. The 1 million yuan yellow scarf was indeed a big problem, and they were also having a headache. I didn't expect that Cao Cao would directly ask in the big tent today, it's really. Sun Yu instinctively cast an apologetic look at Shizhitsai. The latter is also somewhat helpless. Ask him what he can do, what can he do, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Million Yellow Turbans, it's just the disease of moss. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Million Yellow Turbans, it's just the disease of moss. The atmosphere inside the big tent is somewhat stagnant. As Cao Cao's words fell, Zizikai frowned tightly, as if pondering. Sun Yu and others on the side also lowered their heads and remained silent. Seeing such a situation, Cao Cao knew he had made a slip of the tongue. The current inquiry should not be placed on such an occasion. 1 million yellow scarves are ultimately a major concern for the entire Cao camp. How could they be so easy to solve? Moreover, the number of soldiers that Yan Zhou can use is less than 100,000. 100,000 to a million, even if a soldier immortal is still alive, he will also have a headache. It can be solved in just 2 or 3 sentences. The discussion just now finally boosted the confidence of the soldiers in the Cao camp, but now it has been dragged down by one sentence from him. Cao Cao had some regrets, but as the Lord, since the problem had already been thrown out, there was no reason to take it back. He instinctively looked at the other people in the tent, not to mention the advisors, but even his own clan brothers, and his expression at this moment was somewhat dull. As Cao Cao's gaze wandered, he realized that within the entire tent, everyone else had a gloomy expression, except for one who seemed somewhat unharmed. That's Shiyu. At this moment, Shiyu doesn't care much. In his opinion, the million yellow scarf is just a disease of moths and scabies after all. As long as he stays up until winter, Boss Cao can instantly tame hundreds of thousands of yellow scarves. With these hundreds of thousands of yellow turban soldiers and horses, Boss Cao can firmly occupy the position of Yenzhou and then start the prelude to dominating the Central Plains. Shiyu is completely standing in the position of a predetermined outcome, naturally not paying much attention to the current situation. However, the entire Cao camp now knows nothing about what will happen in the future. The million-dollar yellow scarf at present is still a sharp sword hanging over the entire head of Yenzhou. I have to take it seriously. Winning several battles is easy, and those present are not incompetent. But it's too difficult to defeat a million yellow scarves. Zizikai felt a bit helpless. His 2 brothers had just joined the Cao camp, and today was supposed to be the time to showcase their talents. Unexpectedly, in the end, a question stumped him. How to solve the problem of millions of yellow scarves? If such a matter can be easily resolved, it will surely be remembered for eternity. Shizitsai's face looked a bit ugly, and beads of sweat as big as beans were about to fall from his forehead. At this moment, Cao Cao's gaze was fixed on Shiyu. To uphold righteousness, there can be good strategies. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere inside the large tent, which was originally somewhat stagnant, suddenly began to become solemn. Everyone first glanced at Cao Cao, then couldn't help but look at Shiyu. Sun Yu felt that his whole person was a bit bad. What does my lord want to do? It's already very unwise for you to ask such a question, just a loyal actor is enough. Do we have to ask all the actors once? Isn't this grilling the 2 brothers on the stove? If there is no answer to today's matter, it may not be too difficult for the acting brothers to serve well in the Cao camp. Qingyu beside him was also somewhat surprised. My lord seems to have lost his sanity today. He began to sympathize with the playwright brothers, thinking that today Cao Cao was too serious in welcoming talented actors. Qingyu still had some envy. But now he can no longer be envious. The taste of being grilled on the fire is too unpleasant. Zizikai was also somewhat stunned. Cao Cao, what's going on? If you ask this question again, everyone is already very embarrassed. How can you still ask? And, still ask your own brothers. It seems that after today, my 2 brothers may not be able to stay in the Cao camp for much longer. Today's situation, when it spreads, it will be his brothers who cannot even ask a question. What else is there to offer? The face of the talented actor had already started to turn red. It would have been too ugly if he had not left the tent. He wished he could have picked up his own brothers and left the Cao camp directly. This kung fu is just a blink of an eye. As everyone's thoughts flowed, Shiyu looked up and found that Cao Cao was looking at him eagerly. Being stared at by a big man like this, Shiyu almost felt her scalp tingling. If it weren't for knowing that he was in Cao camp, not on Liu Bei's side, Shiyu couldn't help but leave. Seeing everyone's eyes all looking at him, Shiyu learned from his brother to straighten his robe. After all, he was well prepared to become a strategist. At present, the boss is asking himself a question: what else is there to refuse? Arched his hand, Shiyu wished he had a fan in his hand right now. He spoke softly. Lord, there's no need to worry about this matter. 1,000,000 yellow scarves are just a disease of moths and scabies, and it's not worth worrying about. As soon as Cao Ying spoke, everyone's eyes widened. 1,000,000 yellow scarves, the disease of moths and scabies. There is no such lightness as that. Sun Yu's mouth twitched. You two brothers, how can you pretend to be better than each other? Chen Yu was even more surprised, as he had witnessed it today. The group of Cao camp generals across from him couldn't help but look up at Shiyu. Cao Ren's mind even began to think about what Shiyu would say later. It won't be like the one rumored to be Lu Bu. Opening your mouth means that the lords outside the city are like grass and mustard, right? After all, in his opinion, Shiyu is definitely a fierce general. He had already thought of what this guy would say later. It's nothing more than asking his own brother to give him tens of thousands of soldiers and horses, and he will lead his own troops to fight against those yellow scarves. No, if this guy really said that, my elder brother might agree. When the time comes, there will be no chance for them to lead the troops. Cao Ren was a bit anxious, and his eyes instinctively turned towards Cao Cao. After hearing Shiyu's words, Cao Cao's whole body was somewhat stunned. Almost subconsciously, Cao Cao leaned forward and said, I don't know, sir, what did you teach me? Sitting beside him, Zizikai felt a bit anxious. Although his own brothers used to have sharp thinking, 1,000,000 yellow scarves were not a small matter. If there is no good answer at the moment, their brothers may have a big problem and will probably have to pack their luggage and leave Cao camp. Shiyu looked at everyone and smiled lightly at the corners of his mouth. My lord, have you ever thought that although the 1,000,000 Yellow Turban had a great influence, why did it leave Qingzhou and come to Yenzhou? Shiyu asked, and as soon as he spoke, everyone instinctively looked at me and at you. Huang Jin ran to Yenzhou. Why? Isn't it normal for someone else to run from Qingzhou to Yenzhou? Since the beginning of the Yellow Turban Rebellion, there have been no scattered Yellow Turbans in the current 13 provinces of the Great Han Dynasty. Although some of these yellow scarves have changed their names, such as Mount Taishan Thief, they are still yellow scarves after all. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. What kind of soldiers should I lead as a strategist? Don't do it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. What kind of soldiers should I lead as a strategist? Don't do it. Why did Huang Jin flee from Qingzhou to Yenzhou? Cao Ying and his group did not reflect on the essence of this issue. For these people, such things are just too common. There are yellow scarves wandering in various states of the Han Dynasty, and their siege of cities and territories is nothing more than to overthrow the Han Dynasty. What other questions are there? The soldiers couldn't figure it out, but the strategist beside them, along with Cao Cao, couldn't help but start thinking. Sun Yu never thought about such a problem in his daily life. He just listened to Shiyu's confident expression and felt that this problem was not simple. The actor beside him was the first to think about what his younger brother meant by what he said. He knows his own brother too well, and if he could say such a thing in this situation, he must already have an answer in his heart. At present, Zizikai is not panicking anymore. Cao Cao frowned and pondered for a moment, still unable to understand what Shiyu meant. It's better to directly ask Shiyu if you think about it like this. Looking at Shiyu again, Cao Cao's expression suddenly became more serious. Damn it, I don't understand. Please speak up, sir. As the words fell, everyone in the camp turned their gaze to Shiyu. Shiyu did not continue to play tricks, he spoke lightly at the corner of his mouth, with only two simple words. Grain. Shiyu chuckled lightly, and after saying the two words, Sun Yu's entire eye on the left head widened. Yes. Food. He only focused on conquering cities and territories with the Yellow Turban in order to overthrow the Han dynasty, but never thought about why the Yellow Turban from Qingzhou fled to Yanzhou. Nowadays, the land of Qingzhou is not completely occupied by Huangjin, and millions of Huangjin are not in a hurry to conquer Qingzhou. But we must sacrifice our proximity and seek our distance to conquer Yanzhou. The most fundamental issue is food. Nowadays, Qingzhou cannot afford to raise millions of yellow scarves, and with the families carried by these yellow scarves, there are millions of people. There is not so much food in the entire Qingzhou. At present, Yanzhou is still able to support some yellow scarves to some extent. That's why Huangjin fled from Qingzhou to Yanzhou. A talented person who upholds righteousness can reveal their essence with just one word. Sun Yu arched his hand, and in just a moment, he already understood what Shiyu was trying to say in his heart. With this effort, Qingyu beside him naturally understood as well. As he looked at Shiyu, there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. He really underestimated the other person just now. Cao Cao sat at the top, and when he heard the word grain, his whole body couldn't help but tremble. Yeah. Those Qingzhou yellow scarves are often unable to survive before they flee to Yanzhou. Sir, speak in detail quickly. Cao Cao couldn't sit still any longer, and he wished he could just step forward and pull Shiyu to his side. If the other party can name the essence, I think they must have a good plan for the yellow scarf in their heart. Shi Jizai smiled at the corners of his mouth and looked at his younger brother, feeling relieved in his heart. Shiyu coughed lightly. Grain, millions of yellow scarves flowing from Qingzhou to Yanzhou, the most fundamental problem is nothing more than food. Since the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the land of Qingzhou has been in chaos for years. Today, Qingzhou can no longer afford the food needs of millions of yellow turbans. That's why these yellow scarf thieves fled to Yanzhou. My lord imagines that in today's Yanzhou, even in various parts of the Han dynasty, which state can easily raise millions of yellow scarves. I can't afford it. Cao Cao instinctively shook his head. Not to mention the land of Yanzhou, since the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the regions of various states in the Great Han Dynasty were not in dire straits. In addition, after the feudal lords launched a campaign against Dongzhuo, they each went their own way. At present, it is considered good for various feudal lords to be self-sufficient. Who can afford these millions of yellow scarves? Yes. I can't afford to raise it. It's not just that the feudal lords in the world can't afford it, but now the Great Han can't afford it anymore. My lord imagines how long the Yellow Turban can last in Yanzhou, even though it has won consecutive victories. This year's spring plowing has passed, and how much food can there be? And Huangjin, millions of people, have already given up farming and are now wandering around the four places, so wait until winter. At that time, the entire Yanzhou will be like Qingzhou, unable to withstand millions of wandering yellow scarves anymore. However, at that time, these yellow scarves no longer had the ability to flee to other states, and those lords would not casually allow these yellow scarves to enter. At that time, these people will naturally collapse. So, a million yellow scarves are just a disease of moss. When winter comes, the yellow scarves will surely break free from attack. Shiyu smiled lightly at the corners of her mouth and glanced at her elder brother, who quickly understood. The talented actor bowed his hand. My lord, Fengyi's words are good. Now we only need a few victories, and after that, we only need to stand firm and clear the fields. After being exposed by Shiyu, the atmosphere of the entire Cao camp instantly became lively. The generals did not expect that the so-called 1 million yellow scarf would be broken by itself in winter without attacking. The strategists on the side looked at Shiyu with a strange expression in their eyes. Cao Cao's worries in his heart were instantly swept away, and he couldn't help but lie down to celebrate. Okay. Okay. After saying, good, 3 times in a row, Cao Cao's heart was completely clouded. After looking at the generals, he couldn't help but look at Shiyu. How virtuous and capable I am, how can I recruit such a person under my command? He began to feel grateful for bringing in Shiyu during the meeting just now. If it weren't for Shiyu, he would still be worried about the million-yuan yellow scarf. In that case, I am equal to the Yellow Turban in this battle, and I will definitely win. Fengyi, do you think who should I send to fight this battle? Cao Cao's eyes were burning, and as he looked at Shiyu, he became even more appreciative. The drama in front of her couldn't help but question her outstanding skills, even in terms of military strength. In this battle at Huangjin, it was easy to win by defending and waiting for an attack, combined with ambushes. This is a great opportunity for meritorious service. He had the intention to let Shiyu lead his own troops to battle, but these words cannot be directly expressed. Looking at Shiyu with that gaze, it was clear that he was saying, hurry up and ask for help on your own. As long as you stand up, I will immediately agree to let you lead the troops. However, at this moment, Shiyu paid no attention to the gaze of Boss Cao. What do you mean, let me lead troops? I want to be a strategist. What kind of soldiers should I lead? Don't do it. Besides, didn't you already agree to make me a strategist? At this moment, the generals of Cao camp were already in a state of anxiety. If it weren't for Cao Cao's previous warning, these people would have stood up long ago. The left-hand group of advisors are not in a hurry, and the matter of leading troops to fight has nothing to do with them. Shiyu also thought the same way, just staring at Cao Cao with a fixed gaze on himself. He still arched his hand. I think any general who leads the army can do it. It's just a little credit. End of this chapter. Why don't the Lord divide his troops and fight in chapter 7? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Why don't the Lord divide his troops and fight in chapter 7? Oh. Is Fengyi asking for his own orders? As soon as Shiyu finished speaking, Cao Cao eagerly followed suit. As he stood up, he opened his mouth and planned to order Shiyu to lead the troops. However, after these words were spoken, a kind of general and strategist in the big tent stared at Cao Cao with wide eyes. This time, Cao Cao regained his senses. Just now, Shiyu didn't mean to ask for his own help. He's in a hurry. The faces of the Cao family generals on the side have all started to turn black. What does it mean? What does your elder brother mean by this? Why are you still talking nonsense when others have no intention of leading troops? The conspirators looked at Cao Cao with some silence. This sudden preference is also too obvious. I just don't take others seriously anymore. Shiyu's face turned a bit dark. Lord, I didn't ask for your help. Boss Cao, what do you mean? He suspected that Cao Cao might have some ear problems. The historical records only say that Cao Cao had a headache, but they don't say that this guy also has an ear disease. Can headwind still affect hearing problems? Cao Cao naturally realized that he had said the wrong thing, but as the protagonist, this kind of scene is simply insignificant. No problem, it's Cao who got distracted. Cao Cao waved his hand, showing no signs of dying in front of everyone. That face is thick and the heart is black, which can be considered completely grasped and stable. So, who do Fengyi think can be sent to send troops? He repeated a question to Shiyu, and then his gaze turned towards the group of Cao Ying. The rest of the people didn't pay attention to the episode just now. The dispatch of troops at present is something that generals should ponder, and Sun Yu and others have no intention of interrupting. Xiahou on the side stood up straight at this moment. Big brother, I'll go. Yuan Rang, you don't need to do this, I'll do it. Watching Xiahou stand up coldly, Cao Ren hurriedly reached out and grabbed the other person. Xiahou Yuan on one side also had some unusual movements. Even Cao Chun sitting at the back couldn't help but want to get up. You should know that nowadays, all the elder brothers and subordinates in the clan are leading troops, but he is still a bareheaded commander to this day. He was somewhat envious, but he knew it wasn't his turn to handle such things. The generals here rose up again to lead the troops, and Cao Cao didn't care about it this time. He wanted Shiyu to lead the army, but judging from the other party's intentions, he had no intention of leading the army at all. If this Kung Fu is criticizing Cao Ren and others, it would be too much. However, they are all our own brothers. Who should be sent to fight? Cao Cao also had a headache. If there are enough troops under my command right now, I can send them all out. But he doesn't have so many troops. Lord, since all the generals are willing to request orders, why not let each of them bring some troops and horses? Seeing the current situation inside the big tent, Shiyu couldn't help but laugh. As soon as Cao Cao spoke, he instinctively glanced at him. Bring some troops each. He doesn't have so many soldiers. When he gathers together, he can still deal with Huang Jin. If he disperses and goes to fight Huang Jin, isn't it seeking death? The generals are also a bit stunned. Is this something that can divide troops? If the troops were to be divided, it wouldn't be running to make achievements, but running to die. Everyone looked at Shiyu as if they had been splashed with a basin of cold water. At this moment, Cao Cao suddenly calmed down. It is impossible for Shiyu to be unaware of the dangers of dividing troops without expressing his previous remarks. He could say this, perhaps because he already had other good ideas in mind. A group of strategists also looked curiously at Shiyu, dividing the troops. Is there any other explanation? What does Fengyi mean by these words? Currently, our army has only tens of thousands of soldiers to fight against. If we divide our troops, wouldn't it be like using eggs to strike stones? The Lord is dressed up. Shiyu gently shook her head. The fundamental principle of dividing and attacking is a military strategy, and the key lies in how to divide and strike. Isn't this nonsense? Everyone knows that dividing troops is not a problem, and the purpose of dividing troops naturally depends on how to fight. Oh, it seems that Fengyi already has a strategy in mind. Speak up quickly, don't hesitate. Cao Cao had a smile on his face. I wonder how many cavalry soldiers are under the Lord's command now. Cavalry. Cao Cao's subordinates naturally had cavalry, but compared to his infantry, the cavalry was only a few thousand at best. 5,000. There are a total of 5,000 cavalry under my command. 5,000, that's enough. Shiyu nodded. I have 16 words of truth, you can understand it by listening to it. Shiyu turned his head to look at the generals of the Cao camp, and the others stared at him with wide eyes. Xiahou Dun was already impatient. Sir, speak quickly. What truth is it? When the enemy advances, I retreat, when the enemy stays, I disturb, when the enemy is tired, I fight, when the enemy retreats, I pursue. If the generals understand these 16 words of truth, the Lord can divide the cavalry among them. In this way, you can deal with the Yellow Turban. The Lord will send another good general with 10,000 soldiers to set up an ambush in the area where the bandits pass by. In this way, the Yellow Turban will surely be defeated. Guerrilla warfare. This is the 16-character mantra of the former Taizu. It was used on cavalry in the era of cold weapons, and it was a top-notch military technique. After saying these words, Shiyu did not speak again. And upon hearing the 16-character truth, all the people of Chao Ying were somewhat stunned. After all, no strategist had a quick brain, and these generals only began to bow their heads and ponder one by one. Sun Yu and others on the side quickly understood. Cao Cao's pupils shine even more. Okay, what a 16-character mantra. I understand. The number of cavalry is small, but using a 16-character mantra can be said to be just right. And the million yellow scarves, most of them are infantry, dealing with cavalry can only be said to be a surplus of heart but insufficient of strength. If this tactic is repeated several times, the yellow scarf will inevitably become chaotic. At that time, if you set up an ambush, you will surely win. Cao Cao's eyes began to light up, and those eyes looked at Shi Yu at the moment. Is this a strategist? What kind of ordinary strategist is this? It's like a precious existence. Sun Yu also laughed along with this kung fu. Unexpectedly, Fengyi's insight into the art of war is so profound that I feel inferior. As soon as Sun Yu spoke, Qing Yu beside him also nodded and said, as Mr. Shi Yu said, the great liberation of the military academy. Dramatic talents are a bit numb. My younger brother is aware of his military prowess, but I didn't expect him to underestimate it. He came to the Cao camp to showcase what he had learned, and now that his own brothers have taken the spotlight, he always feels like he is about to be ignored. At this moment, Cao Cao had already begun to arrange his troops. Seeing this scene, Shi Yu seemed to have thought of something. By the way, if I remember correctly, I'm afraid Mr. Cao also wants to lead his own troops at the moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. What are their brothers doing? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. What are their brothers doing? Hearing that Cao Cao had indeed left 1,000 cavalry for him at the moment, Shi Yu's eyebrows twitched. As a strategist, he feels that certain things should still be reminded. My lord, now that I am new to Yenzhou, all my subordinates are brave and brave. My lord only needs to sit in the main tent. As the saying goes, the son of a daughter cannot afford to sit down. The Lord is now the reliance of all of us in Yenzhou, so we must not take risks easily. If Shi Yu remembers correctly, when Cao Cao wore a yellow scarf, it was still somewhat dangerous. If there is a butterfly effect caused by one or two words from oneself, and suddenly something happens when Cao Cao is wearing a yellow scarf, then it's not good. He was still thinking that after Cao Cao grew up, he would quickly move to Xuchang and make a salted fish. Isn't it a great joy in life to marry a few more wives when the time comes? When Cao Cao was feeling proud on his side, he suddenly saw Shi Yu arched his hand again to examine, and quickly listened attentively. However, upon hearing this, the other party actually asked them not to lead the troops. How could this be possible? Although I am now the governor of Yenzhou. But Cao Cao also led his soldiers to kill him in the Yellow Turban rebellion back then. Now that there is truth to be told, he doesn't think this is anything at all. However, since it was Shi Yu who said it, he took it to heart to some extent. A group of advisors on the side also followed the advice. At this moment, Cao Cao could only nod his head. Sir, what you said is true. Don't worry, Cao must have a clear idea. Upon hearing these words, Shi Yu could only give up. After all, he had already said everything he needed to say. In the account, there is almost enough talk about dealing with yellow scarves. The sky outside has long been pitch black like ink. At this moment, Shi Yu was already a bit tired. When he saw Cao Cao listening to his words, he turned his head and glanced at his brother. The two of them got up and planned to say goodbye first. On the side, the advisor Qing Yu also stood up. After the crowd dispersed, Shi Yu followed his brother Shi Zhizai back to their camp. As he walked back, Zizikai kept looking at his younger brother. I just feel that today I truly understand how powerful my younger brother is. With 1,000,000 yellow scarves that he had put in a lot of effort to think about how to deal with, Shi Yu easily solved them at the first sight. The subsequent military strategy was no less than that of a military immortal, and he was already a bit numb. Shi Yu shone brightly like the rising sun in Chaoying, but he himself became like a firefly. However, when it comes to jealousy, there is no such thing. I just feel a little confused suddenly. Shi Yu turned his head to look at Shi Zhizai and saw that the other person seemed to be somewhat silent. After careful consideration, he also reacted accordingly. Big brother, is it my fault for speaking up today? Ayu, what are you saying? I'm your older brother, how could I be jealous of you? Zizikai is a bit angry. He is not the kind of person who is jealous of his younger brother. I naturally understand that my elder brother is not such a person. Does he feel that there is no place to show his ambitions at the moment? Shiyu smiled and gently patted Shijitsai with her hand. I am aware of my elder brother's talent, but today I am just a little quick-witted. When it comes to detailed military strategies, my younger brother is not as good as my elder brother. When it comes to government affairs, my younger brother is not as good as my elder brother, as I mentioned earlier. You two are both great talents in the world, and you can see the world with your local talents. Nowadays, Duke Cao is weak, but my younger brother dares to say that in the next day, among the 13 provinces in the world, Duke Cao will surely occupy most of them. And if Duke Cao wants to achieve this, he must have the help of his elder brother. Shiyu whispered softly, but the talented actor beside him stumbled. Be gentle, I almost fell apart when you slapped me. My younger brother is right. Nowadays, the great Han dynasty is on the verge of collapse, and in the future, it will be a continuous campaign by feudal lords. The reason why his two brothers joined Cao Cao was twofold. Firstly, because Sun Yu invited them, and secondly, because there was no other place to go. They were ultimately just a humble family, and Yuan Shao in the north looked down upon them. As for the other feudal lords in the world, there were no outstanding people. Cao Cao had already discussed this before his brothers came. Shiyu's admiration for Cao Cao is quite high. If I could showcase what I have learned to help Cao Cao regain stability in the world, it would be great. With such thoughts in his heart, the talented actor's mood has become much smoother. However, the strength on this kid's palm is really strong. If it weren't for the other party constantly pulling him to strengthen his body, he might have been lying on the ground just now. Big brother, when I went out a while ago, did you forget to exercise again? Did that dog like Guo Fengxiao drag you to drink again? No, no. Zizikai waved his hand and his face turned slightly pale. My own brother is good everywhere. Although he is the elder brother, he is still being controlled by his younger brother, even drinking alcohol, which is simply excessive. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't really defeat the other party, at least he would have let them know what it means to be like a father to an elder brother. There was nothing to say overnight. The next day, just as the sky broke, Shiyu took the initiative to take the actor who was lying in bed out to exercise. Fengyi, what are you doing? The talented actor felt dazed and dragged up, completely speechless. He had already arrived at the military camp, didn't he let go? Big brother, it's time to exercise. As a strategist, a healthy body is essential, otherwise how can we handle more and more government affairs in the future? Shiyu couldn't help but drag his acting ambitions to the school venue. He knew that the talented actor had passed away at a young age. In the end, it's just a lack of exercise, poor physical fitness, and like Guo Fengxiao, he likes to drink and wander around the kiln. Can this prevent premature death? He has now become the younger brother of a talented actor, so it is impossible for this guy to die young like this. So, from an early age, he began to urge talented actors to exercise their bodies. Over the years, this guy's physical fitness has been considered similar. There was no other choice but to follow his younger brother to practice the so-called 5-animal play. It is said that this trick was learned by his younger brother when he went out to learn from a doctor named Hua Tuo. Practice does indeed have the effect of strengthening the body. Two people practice on the school field. At this moment, the early soldiers couldn't help but look at the two of them. Not long after, even Cao Cao heard the news. When he arrived, he happened to see the actor brothers making strange movements in front of everyone on the campus. This can be considered as giving Cao Cao a long eye. Oh, Wenruo is also here. Seeing Sun Yu standing beside him, Cao Cao instinctively smiled and asked, Wenruo, who is dedicated to righteousness and ambition. What are you doing? Lord, I heard Fengyi say before that when their brothers were at home, they would do some morning exercises every day. I think that's it. Oh. Cao Cao suddenly realized. Unexpectedly, Fengyi and Jitsai are so diligent. Even deep in the military camp, they don't forget to wake up early to do exercises. It's really admirable. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Fengyi is not an ordinary person. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Fengyi is not an ordinary person. In early May, the breeze is blowing gently. When the warm light shone brightly on General Chao's camp from the sky, the entire campus was filled with soldiers. Zizikai felt his whole body start to tremble. The movements, which had been practiced for several years and had already become proficient, suddenly became extremely awkward for some reason. Even when he discovered the presence of Cao Cao and Sun Yu in the crowd surrounding him, his entire body seemed to stiffen. Damn it, why should I accompany Fengyi to do such a thing? I couldn't help but let out a cry in my heart, and Zizikai felt like his mind was blank. When he saw Cao Cao and Sun Yu whispering and laughing not far away, he felt that their gaze must be on him. He intentionally waved his sleeve and left, and his eyes instinctively glanced at his younger brother. At this moment, Shiyu seemed as if nothing had happened. The actions that should be taken are still of such standard, as if there is no one around. How could he do such a thing without changing his face in front of so many people? Damn it, really damn it. When there were crowds around, Shiyu naturally noticed them early on. Even when Cao Cao and Sun Yu came over, he nodded and gestured to each of them. Is morning exercise such a thing? Moreover, in the turbulent era of the Three Kingdoms, Shiyu naturally paid more attention to it. Not to mention that a good body can live longer in troubled times, at least ensure that you cannot get sick casually. In this era, technology and a series of other things are not well developed. A healthy body is the most important thing for a person in an era where small pains and illnesses can potentially lead to death. As for the talented actors, of course, they were forced by him. This guy in history died young, leaving only one name in the entire history book. And Shiyu, who is familiar with the talents and abilities of drama, naturally understands. My own cheap elder brother, his ability is definitely not inferior to that guy Guofengshao. The only regret is to die early. Shiyu is clear. At present, I am nothing more than a strategist of this era with a longer vision and some future knowledge. Besides, he cannot compare his subtle military and political abilities to these guys. And the importance of health preservation is clear to him. Why did Sima Yi have the chance to seize the world of Cao Wei in the end? It's not because he lived longer than anyone else. If possible, Shiyu even wanted to persuade Cao Cao to pay attention to his health. Of course, whether Mr. Cao is willing to listen or not is another matter. After finishing a set of 5 animal plays, Shiyu felt as if his whole body had become much more peaceful. At this moment, he lifted his eyes and glanced at the nearby Zizikai, whose expression was as if he was suffering from grief. This guy, in the words of future generations, probably feels like he's lost in society. Brother, your posture just now was a bit non-standard. Shiyu spoke lightly. The actor beside him was about to explode when he heard these words. You, Jitsai, Fengyi. Just as Jitsai was about to scold his younger brother, Cao Cao and Sun Yu, who had been watching from the side, saw that they had finished morning exercises and walked over directly. I've seen your lord. The two brothers bowed to Cao Cao. Cao Cao smiled at the corner of his mouth and said, there aren't so many rules. You don't have to be seen out like this in the military camp in the future. Cao Cao was very enthusiastic, and his eyes naturally noticed the expressions of the actors and brothers. Seeing Jitsai's resentment on his face, his heart was already clear. This so-called morning exercise is probably driven by Shiyu's hard work and talent. However, he was somewhat curious about such things. Although Sun Yu had explained earlier, he couldn't help but turn his gaze towards Shiyu. Fengyi, your brother's morning exercises just now were very different from those in the military. Upon hearing these words, Shiji's face darkened. Shiyu next to him smiled and said, Lord, this morning exercise is called 5-animal play. It was learned by a doctor whom you had made friends with in his early years. Its exercise can nourish the body and drive away all kinds of diseases. Oh, there is such an effect. Fengyi is really not an ordinary person. Cao Cao instinctively replied. Zizikai saw that Cao Cao didn't have much enthusiasm for his brother's practicing morning exercises, and his discomfort all over him suddenly decreased. Fengyi's ability to wield such force is extremely self-disciplined in daily life. Sun Yu praised on the side. Cao Cao nodded along. I used to think that Shiyu had a small physique, but his strength was extremely extraordinary. Today, seeing this situation, I understand that everything is not without a reason. 5 birds play, no wonder I saw your form just now and had a strong sense of tiger vitality. Are you interested, Lord? Shiyu looked up at Cao Cao. The latter hesitated for a moment, seemingly not expecting Shiyu to ask such a question, and instinctively nodded. Seeing Cao Cao's reaction, Shiyu decisively followed suit and explained, the form of the called 5-animal play is based on the changes in the posture of the 5 animals. Tigers, deer, bears, apes, and birds. Its intention is to seek the majesty of tigers, the tranquility of deer, the stability of bears, the agility of apes, and the agility of birds. By practicing them, one can naturally cultivate and maintain good health. Oh. Cao Cao's eyes lit up slightly. The actor on the side was a bit confused. What's the situation? The Lord is so serious about listening to Shiyu's story. To be honest, Cao Cao's demeanor was quite satisfying for the talented actor. As a counselor, the Lord's respect for them naturally leaves an impression in the mind of a counselor. Moreover, the person who made Cao Cao have such an attitude was still his own younger brother. This feeling is naturally extremely comfortable. Okay, after listening to what Fengyi said, these 5 bird plays are really extraordinary. Cao Cao had a smile on his face and instinctively praised Shiyu. As the Lord, Cao Cao did quite well in recognizing his own strategist. It's like running barefoot to greet you, or at some point, when it's cold, he'll cover you with a cloak, but he never stops doing it. Moreover, Cao Cao, as a person, likes one person's performance, which is openly displayed in front of everyone without any concealment. When Guaniri was in the Cao camp in the future, Boss Chao's attention to him was the kind that even the generals of the Cao camp were jealous of the separation of Jibi. It's almost time, my lord. Don't forget that there's still something important to do today. Sun Yu watched from the side as Cao Cao and Shiyu chatted better and better. Both of them were ready to start teaching, so he couldn't help it. You are the person I have high hopes for to support the Han family building. There are also moth thieves watching outside. What kind of fuck are you learning? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Lord is not here today. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The Lord is not here today. Sun Yu didn't feel any jealousy in his heart, it was just that Cao Cao's behavior made him feel a bit helpless. And Shiyu, this guy is really good. Although the deliberation was completed yesterday, shouldn't we coordinate and handle it today? This guy. As soon as Sun Yu spoke, the talented actor also came to his senses. He can't let Cao just chat with his younger brother here like this. At present, the two brothers have just started working. It is a good thing for the protagonist to love his own younger brother, but excessive affection may lead to resentment. Lord, Fengyi, if you're right, it's almost time. Shi Jizai followed with a reminder, and upon hearing this, Cao Cao regained his senses. He opened his hands and grabbed the playwright brothers one by one, saying, "Walk, walk, follow me to the big tent." Being pulled by Cao Cao, Shiyu had the intention to break free, but seeing her own brother's happy expression, she could only helplessly follow Cao Cao into the big tent. At this moment, after they left, the voices of discussion in the entire venue gradually became louder. Is that the strategist who just arrived a few days ago? Yes, what were they doing with the action they just made? Who knows? After arriving at Cao Cao's tent, Shiyu was not aware of the discussion about himself in the school venue. The latter had already arranged for the three of them to sit down affectionately. The discussion about dealing with yellow scarves was already settled yesterday. At this time, the general of Cao camp had already ordered troops and horses to leave the camp, while Qingyu rushed back to Shoujiang to do his own business. At present, there are no other people in the entire account. The playwright brothers sat on Cao Cao's right side, while Sunyu sat on his left side. After the four of them took their seats, Cao Cao began to have friendly conversations with the three of them. Shiyu thought he was going to do something serious next. Who knows, what I call a weak leader is actually not something serious to deal with at this time. At present, although Cao Cao is the governor of Yanzhou, he has not yet fully controlled Yanzhou. On weekdays, apart from communicating with some people such as Yuan Shao, I only pay attention to the situation in North Korea, and there is not much other government affairs. Jitsai, it would be great if you could take on the position of sacrificial wine for a certain military commander this time. Cao Cao and Shi Jitsai talked for a while, and soon the position of Shi Jitsai was directly determined. Unlike the protagonist Bo of Shiyu, Zizikai served as the military advisor's sacrificial wine in Chao's camp. However, this position does not have this title among today's big men. Simply put, Zizikai is equivalent to Cao Cao's personal strategist. Shiyu is clear that this position was created by Mr. Chao's sudden brainstorming. Afterwards, Guo Jia will also take on this position. Dramatic talents didn't care much, just a position. He didn't care about it at the moment, as long as he could be valued by Cao Cao and showcase what he had learned. After arranging things, Cao Cao originally wanted to talk to Shiyu. However, this kung fu drama you had already picked up the bamboo slips placed on the table and looked at them without any intention of dealing with Cao Cao. He turned his head and glanced at Sunyu, who was also reviewing the bamboo slips. As for the talented actors, with the position of military strategist offering wine, they also began to look up bamboo slips for Cao Cao. In short, all the advisors in the tent began to take action, but Cao Cao couldn't sit still. Thinking that his brothers in the clan had already led troops to harass Huang Zhan, he felt a little hot in his heart. Time flies by in a hurry. When Shiyu finally finished reading the book in his hand, the sky had already turned completely dark. He was somewhat moved, as the words on the bamboo slips looked quite laborious. There are quite a few bamboo slips in the big tent. In addition to military tactics, there are also some strategic theories within military tactics. In a day's effort, he finished reading Strategies of the Warring States and one book of documents. It wasn't until someone lit a lamp in the big tent that Shiyu regained his senses. "Master, I'm going back." As Shiyu stood up, the nearby Shi Jitsai and Sunyu also stood up. Cao Cao has long been sitting numb. Sitting in the big tent one day, three strategists were all looking at bamboo slips, and he had no choice but to follow suit. Now, it can be considered the end. Nodding at the few people, Cao Cao stood up and sent them out of the tent. After leaving the tent, Shiyu stretched lazily. In this era, there are not many projects at night, let alone being in a military camp. At dusk on the western frontier, the soldiers trained in the military camp also began to change their guard and rest. The next time is as imagined by Shiyu. Just like clocking into work every day, he, along with Zizikai and Shuanyu, would sit in Cao Cao's tent for a long time every day. The military newspaper also returned a few letters. The strategy of guerrilla warfare has achieved remarkable results, with military reports by Cao Ren and others boasting wildly. The Yellow Turban army seems to be constantly being harassed, and there is already a main force moving westward. Inside the big tent, Cao Cao, who received the military report again, felt his blood boil with anger. Nowadays, he is not at the age of an old hero, and the days when he rode his horse and wielded his sword to fight back and forth in the yellow scarf have only recently passed. Watching his own brothers killing each other happily outside, he couldn't bear it anymore. For this situation, Xiyu naturally did not understand what Boss Cao was thinking. These past few days, he has rarely checked into work at Cao Cao's place. After waking up early and practicing morning exercises, he returned to his camp on his own. After about 10 days of hard work, he has already read several ancient books. When the sun was hanging in the center, Xiyu had just finished his lunch when he saw Shi Jizai suddenly enter the camp. Seeing that Shiji had just returned, Xiyu felt a little puzzled. "Brother, why did you come back so early today? I haven't had much government affairs these past few days, so why don't I just come back and take a nap?" Dramatic talents are somewhat melancholic. He is the kind of person who can lie down and never wants to sit down. Who knew he had a younger brother like this, probably a few years ago, who forced him to wake up early? "I am currently in a military camp, and it still looks like this." Oh, didn't the protagonist pull his brother to narrate today? During this period, when Xiyu and Sun Yu were reading booklets in Cao Cao's tent, they rarely talked to him. The latter can sometimes only narrate with the help of talented actors. These two people are really birds of a feather in their spirits. Apart from military and political affairs, they chat about which family has good wine and where the girls are very smooth. For this kind of thing, Xiyu sometimes listens attentively, but Sun Yu can't bear it anymore. After staying in the big tent for a few days, Sun Yu started to handle things and set up his own tent. Without Sun Yu by the side, Xiyu thought for a moment and didn't go to the big tent. Afterwards, the only person who goes to work every day is the talented actor. Seeing the other party return early today, Xiyu became somewhat curious. The Lord is not here today, and there is no one in the tent. He led the guards and 1,000 cavalry to leave the camp early. End of this chapter.